We're live. What's up, everybody? We got an awesome stream here today. I've been talking a bit about the work that Ryan and I did on Assassin's Creed. Sorry, I'm like doing two things at the same time. And you guys have been like, let's bring Ryan on, So I was like, yeah, of course, I want to bring Ryan on. Ryan's actually, he's here right now. Let me just show this I'm just going to show my the Vimeo reel. Let me turn this down. I realize I'm not sharing my screen with you, Ryan, so you can't even see what I'm looking at. I'm sharing our reel basically. So yeah, you got to use your imagination. But Ryan and I are here. We're going to talk a bit about like just the process, the nitty gritty. We'll also talk about just the madness of creating this stuff. This is all created with just Ryan and I over the course. Do you know how long we were on Assassin's Creed? I can't remember.
Gosh, it was a few months. It must have been.
Yeah, it was a couple months, at least 2, maybe 3 months.
Yeah.
There was a month where it was like half of the month we weren't using anything. So yeah, we weren't doing much at that time. We were waiting for production or something like that. So, but yeah. No, I mean, Ryan and I have been working together. I met Ryan when I was working at Sony San Diego, and at that time, we Kevin Jolson, our buddy Kevin Jolson, brought me in, and that's when I met Ryan, and I was like, wow, Ryan, you're super freaking good, dude, super smart, and really, you're really knowledgeable of these programs. And this is before Houdini, I think, right? This is before you're getting into Houdini and stuff.
Oh yeah, this is I was just doing After Effects and Cinema 4D at the time. A little
Yeah.
bit of scripting.
Yeah, and we were paired together to work on a project together, and it was like, nothing came of it, which is heartbreaking because it was like we had put a lot of time and energy into it, but it was still like quite rough, and we needed a lot more time and energy to do it. But you remember that? What was that, like Ruin or something like that?
Yeah, it was Ruin, and it was like a crazy fantasy epic, but they didn't like have any characters or story, but we still had to like make an intro. It was like
Oh,
painfully generic, but like we had all this awesome artwork, and yeah, it was like building
yeah.
on quicksand towards the end there.
Yeah, but I knew right from the bat. I was like, well, I felt like there was a great synergy. I think when Ryan and I are working in tandem together, like doing what we do best, like I feel unstoppable. Really, like there's an unspoken bond that I think we've created over working on Total Recall together, Ruin, and Ender's Game, and now Assassin's Creed over the years. Yeah, it's just kind of a natural evolution. That's at least how I feel. I'm not sure how Ryan feels. Ryan's like, I fucking hate Ash. Fuck.
Oh my gosh, never.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I would say like yeah, we've worked on some of the craziest stuff together, and we really have been through like some super intense times. Like looking back on some of these projects, it's like, man, how did we get through that and pull it off? But here we are, man. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a kind of a crazy ride looking back.
It has been a crazy ride. Just the things that we have been able to do. I remember there was when Total Recall was released, and we dropped all that work. I remember seeing on like the message board, somebody was like, "Oh, great! So now Hollywood's just hiring like 2 people to do the job of many." And I was like, "Yeah, that's what happens, dude." I felt kind of bad at the same time. I was like, "Well, yeah," but I was just thinking like, well, shit, you got to be a beast, and and you got to work well with others and find that right bound. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think you and I really match each other really well, though. Like, you think completely different than me, and I know that, and I think vice versa too. We have just different ways our brains and interact with things differently. But yeah, it's been a crazy ride, dude. I remember just like the Total Recall. I remember just like crazy long nights, dude. Like this is like days of just like this is like early. This is early for both of our careers, I think, in this. And it's just, yeah, you're always there though. You're always beasting. I was like, probably the only person I know that works just as hard as me. Not trying to say anything bad about anybody else, but yeah, in this last project, I learned even how deep that even goes with you. I was like, wow, I have even more respect for you now because of what you went through. So yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know it was crazy. Yeah, like yeah, my first son Matic being born like right in the middle of Assassin's Creed was just like crazy. So yeah, I was in the hospital with my wife and the newborn. He was in the NICU, and then yeah, I'd just be like back and forth,
oh God,
crazy
yeah.
time.
Yeah, it was so yeah, for those of you who don't know, like Ryan and his wife, they had their firstborn right when we were in the middle of the production, and I was like, dude, uh like there's nobody that I know that could do what Ryan does at the level that he does. So I was like, well, right in the middle of it, I can. I mean, I obviously was like, please tell me, like I can go try to find somebody to like we can remedy this, and I could leave you alone to be with your family. But you're like, no, we need to finish it, and it's like, fuck, dude, like, yeah, being being there with your family and being able to do this, I don't know, like, man, it was a whole nother level of stress that I don't even understand how you managed to do, but you did, and we pulled through it. And looking back at it too, I'm still really proud of the amount of work that we did for it. And I don't know if you had a chance to go see the film, but it looks incredible on the screen too. So yeah, so
I look forward to seeing it. I have not been able to leave the house long enough to catch a movie yet with the little guy, and but yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it. Hopefully in the theater, if not, maybe on a 4K screen at home one day.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just a matter of time, So, and getting to, just being able to find the time between family and everything. So, but yeah, there you go, guys. I'll be checking to see questions as they come through. Requests. Just make it clear that you guys have a question, because sometimes I'm not going to be paying attention, and I'm not going to be able to like comb through it. So put like in quotations or like in large type, like, I don't know, caps, like questions, so I can just spot it. So, but yeah, so let's jump in. I think for today, I wanted to kind of go through, and Ryan's going to share a screen. We're going to go through some files and stuff. And if you guys have questions as we go through this stuff, let us know. Yeah, it's going to be just an open forum, really. So now's the time. So yeah, and tag me in there for the questions. That way I can see them. So and okay, so there's a couple of vague questions. I'm going to start maybe just adding them onto something like that. So all right, you ready, Ryan? So I'm going to pass the screen over to Ryan. We got him on Skype here. So Ryan, they can now see your screen on Skype. So as you're doing stuff, I know the one thing that's really difficult is to do something like work on Houdini and also answer questions. So while Ryan's doing stuff, I'm going to try and see my best to like answer some of the questions. One of them that's coming in is, what is Houdini here and what is C4D? That's not really a question. It is kind of, but it isn't. So I think maybe you're asking like what parts is Houdini and what parts is Cinema 4D, which if you're looking at the reel, I guess it's quite complicated to say what is and what isn't, because it's so rapid. But yeah, I mean, Ryan, what do you think? Like, is there, I mean, from my experience, from what I know, a lot of the stuff you had built in Houdini, but then you brought stuff over to After Effects and stuff, and Cinema 4D wasn't as widely used as the other programs from what I remember, but could be wrong.
No, that's correct. Actually, this one was basically all Houdini and After Effects. So I wound up. I'm bringing up the After Effects project right now for the brain scanner. So you can kind of check out some of that stuff.
Cool.
Kind of starting from the comps in After Effects, and then we can kind of show the layering, and then kind of dive into Houdini and actually see like how those layers were created.
Yeah, like maybe let's chase like one file, and I can actually,
Yeah.
I can even go before that too, and I can talk about like when I was talking with Justin, the director, and then he had, they had already had some design team come out and do some stuff, but he wasn't really keen to them, so he hired Ryan and I, and so Ryan and I went off and did stuff. But before we go into actually making the production of things, it's all about selling ideas, using references, getting examples, making designs. And Ryan and I work very like in tandem. So like I'll do like a Skype call with Ryan, and I'll say like, oh, what about this? And we'll put a bunch of references together and be like, what about that? What about this? And then sometimes Ryan will go off and make some random weird stuff and then feed me a bunch of weird assets, and I'll hodgepodge them together and make a design. Then I'll go to the director and I'll pitch that design, that style to him or her, and based on their notes. And Justin was incredibly amazing to work with. He was pretty much approved everything the whole time, which is awesome. We had very little feedback, and not very little, but we had very little pushback. Do you remember that? It's like,
Yeah, it wasn't so much pushback as much as he'd just get excited about stuff and want to build on it. So
Yeah.
yeah, there was collaboration, but yeah, like a very like positive way. Yeah, he was a easy guy to work with, I would say.
Yeah, he was awesome. He was really cool. He's a great director too. So that just to give you guys an understanding of how it works, it's like director talking to director, designs, iterations, and then from there we go into the production mode of this, and then there's iterations in there too. So I'm seeing a bunch of questions. One of the questions is coming into, and I'm just gonna kind of pepper I'm not gonna get to everybody's questions, so I apologize, but while Ryan's going through this. But one of the questions is coming in. This is something we'll probably talk about later. Is if Ryan is interested in teaching a course at Learn Squared. So put you on the spot. No, you don't have to
Oh
answer
yeah.
that now. But I mean, yeah. So I'm just gonna start going through these questions as we go. So now we're in After Effects, obviously. So you're going from After Effects, and we're gonna go chase it backwards into Houdini. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a cool way to go.
Okay,
Uh,
go for it.
Once we get to Houdini, things will slow down a bit. So let's kind of start with things when they're looking more finished. But yeah, like this is one of the brain scan compositions. I can kind of skip through these frames a little bit. It does run a little bit slow on full resolution, um, especially streaming. So maybe let's turn that down to like quarter resolution, a more realistic working experience. Yeah, so like these brain scans got pretty intricate with like filling in lots and lots of layers. Um,
Yeah. How are the
they,
render times for you on these?
oh, these were heavy. I mean, like each layer would take anywhere from, gosh, like 10 to 30 minutes. Some of them would take a couple of hours. Like in here, we have some,
How many layers do you have? This is one got like 6 layers, 7 layers.
this one's about 6 or 7 layers. So kind of going one by one.
Hmm.
Um, like actually, this one comp, though, contains many layers. So this is like the epidural trails. So this was actually a particle simulation coming out of Houdini. There's actually like many layers of particle simulations coming out of Houdini. So we can actually dive in there and break that down further. So you can see there's 6 more layers inside of this composition. Um,
That's one thing we talked about in the design too, is like multiple layers. Like the Animus had multiple layers. It wasn't just one thing that would do it. It was like there would be derezzed versions of the brain scan. It was more or less like pooling data, and there was multiple resolutions of that data. Then there was also active neurological pathways that was signaling and all kinds of stuff. So what we would wanted to do is almost treat the Animus like an abstract piece of art that you could look at from without having to interact with it, and you could tell instantly visually, rather than it being a big button that says like the brain scan has been activated or something super archaic and silly like that. It was more or less like creating an art piece or a piece of information that was beautiful, if that makes sense. And that came from multiple layers that Ryan was creating and stuff. There's been a lot of questions people are asking about, like, is cinema relevant anymore? Is Houdini like the new king on the block? From my experience, from what I've seen, it's like it just depends on what you want to use it for. Cinema is incredibly powerful. So is Maya. So is all these other tools. Like the user is actually the limitation, really, from what I found. So what do you think, Ryan?
yeah, like I think it really depends what you're comfortable with first, and then what you're trying to achieve second. Like cinema is a great tool, and it is like I would say for a lot of jobs, it's probably faster. Like you're
Yeah.
going to get to an end result quicker in Cinema 4D than you would in Houdini.
Yes.
Uh, but if you're very much like a coding-minded, engineer-minded person, and let's say you use Cinema 4D, but you write a lot of espresso nodes, you're into expressions and After Effects, then Houdini is probably a great option for you because it takes the gloves off there. Like you're able to dive right in and just write tons of code, tons of expressions. It's node based right from the start. So it's a different approach. It's not for everyone, but if it's for you, it's very exciting, and I think you'll find out pretty quickly playing with it. Like within a day or two, you'll kind of have that aha moment, or you'll be like, I miss cinema.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's more or less like the way that you approach problems and how you think. From what I've experienced, like we actually have a Houdini class from on the platform now from Adam Swab. Are you familiar with Adam's work? I'm sure you probably watched one of his tutorials at some point. He's really
Yeah,
good.
his work.
Yeah, he's really awesome. He's teaching a class right now, and I think it's like there's been this whole thing where people are thinking like, well, this is the verge of like the new era of motion graphics and stuff. But I think you said it perfectly, and especially like you said it perfectly because you use it in your daily workflow, so you
Mhm.
know it personally. And I think that's exactly it. It's like if you find yourself customizing things, and that's how you work, and that's how you problem solve, or if you just take the stuff out of the box like I do and make do with what you have. But I really do believe firmly that it is in the user's ability to go above and beyond, or just to go at whatever pace they want. And it depends on how far you want to go, you know? So there's a limitation that I hit personally in my creative, like thinking and processing and problem solving, where Ryan would take that and go further, you know, and he would change it and figure out how to do these things. And so together as like a teamwork, we would be able to manage those two things, solving what the director wants, then making a production level ready, finished asset basically. And those two powers together are like just unstoppable, really. So, and that's what we're seeing here. So you can go ahead on, you can keep going, Ryan. I'm just going to be kind of blasting in there. So,
Oh, sure thing. Yeah, I can't see the questions as they're coming in. So, yeah, kind of keep steer me back on course if I go off on a tangent.
yeah, no, not a problem, man. I mean, it's just like, we're going to cover so much stuff here today, guys. Like there's really, yeah, we're not going to be able to cover everything or answer everybody's questions, but we'll do our best, you know? So yeah, look how many freaking layers are in there. So that's like what, 7 layers right there?
Yeah, this is like 6, 7 layers.
Yeah.
Yeah, six.
And when we say layers, we're talking about passes from Houdini that are rendered and then brought in here in sequences, right? You're exporting PNG sequences or something?
Yeah, this is a mix of EXRs and PNG sequences. So this pre-comp here is actually kind of an interesting example because it started out with like several passes of these kind of particle groves. I'm kind of tabbing through now. We can see so this actually started with a brain model, and it had several different mesh groups for the different sections of the brain. So I kind of used those as emitters for different groups of particles. And kind of like Ash was saying earlier, like kind of really in mind, like think of it like kind of like an art project where I just kind of focused on creating beautiful little pieces that would all kind of fit together to create a larger whole, but not really knowing what that final piece is going to look like, but just trying to make each piece as detailed and reusable as possible.
Yeah, that's the thing we talked about too, is we wanted to make a very modular setup. So if Justin was like, oh, I really like that thing, like let's say he liked these neuron passageways, that this is a simulation that you created inside of Houdini, right? Which was like this simulation that would bounce off the geometry of the brain model we had.
Yeah, that's correct. So like they would emit from here, and then there's kind of a shell of the geometry around it. You could almost draw a shape layer or something. So yeah, like there was actually a mesh that was kind of holding it all in and giving it its form. So the particles are kind of bouncing off that mesh and then sort of repelling each other to kind of create these nice sort of intricate clumps.
Yeah.
So, and like each pass even had different settings for the system. So they're kind of affecting each other differently. They're bouncing off the different parts of the geometry.
Yeah, super cool.
And then in the end, I actually sent some of those passes through the pixel visualizer module. So then, like those rendered passes went back into Houdini, and I replaced the pixels with these little symbols to create kind of this low res,
Yeah.
kind of cool computer look. And then that was also layered back in with the original pass. So these little bits and pieces actually move along with the simulation as it builds up.
Yep.
So this looks like pixelated mess on your end, but
yeah, no, I mean, because you're not going at full time because it would just take forever. But yeah, I mean, the idea we had with having like those different symbols. So those different symbols we had talked about, were those the assets that I made in Illustrator and then passed them back to you, and then we had individual symbols that were placed on a grid that would correspond to the value of the scale of based on the simulation. Is that what it is? So I was doing basically is replacing the grayscale with like a symbol.
yeah, that's correct. Like I took your Illustrator symbols and I basically converted them into a series of materials that were then brought into Houdini. And in Houdini, I projected the render of the particle system onto a plane that's essentially matching the screen plane. And I'm taking the color values out of that plane and replacing them with these symbols based on their brightness. And then I'm able to kind of control the range of brightness I want, so I can like clamp things off below a certain value, and then I can do the same thing on the high end, just like you would have like your levels in Photoshop or After Effects, same kind of theory, but just in Houdini, and just kind of using the wrong math essentially on the color channel.
So awesome. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it makes it really modular because if we're like, we're looking at it and we go, like Justin's like, oh, it looks too, like, there's too much of this right here, or there's too much of that. I remember one of his notes, our first pass, I think that you kicked out was like 15 FPS. And he was like, oh, it's too jumpy. We need to be more smooth. And then we're like, oh shit, like, cause that just means more file size and longer renders because you're just doubling up everything basically. But it was cool because you're able to go like, okay, that's easy enough. It's just, we're going to alter the frame rate. I think was that one of the issues? I can't remember. It was such a freaking blur. The whole job was
Yeah,
just like,
there was so
just
many.
crazy.
Because yeah, like all the pieces are different. So like with the simulations, you're able to like crank up the sub steps on the simulation. So I think I wound up doing that a bit. So instead of calculating one cycle per frame, was calculating two or three, and then I rendered it at a much higher frame rate as well. So
Yeah.
I was able to just essentially like double these things, and then kind of squeeze more frames out of the same small simulation, and then kind of blend it all together in After Effects.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Yeah, and the way it all kind of comes together. I mean, that right there, I just want to kind of take out of your computer and print it out and put it on my wall. It's the things that were coming through. I was just like, man, this is incredibly beautiful. And I think one thing I will say too, along the sides of production, but the same side of like communicating with your client or your director, is like earning that trust at every step. It allows you to do what you do best. And I feel like this project really reflects, for me personally, it like reflects like the best of our abilities at the time. There was really no hindrances. I think that Justin just let us be artists really, and I don't think that he got in the way of that, which was great and allowed us to really create and go further. And one of the questions that came in that I feel is interesting to talk about is why the graphics are black and white and mono, just like basically there's no color. And that was an idea that Justin kind of conveyed it to me when he was talking about, or to us when he was talking about the idea that he liked it to be like the Animus to be this older machine that didn't have like this hi-fi polish feel to it. It was very much like he liked it to be like this old kind of like Soviet science machine, I guess, that was kind of just hodgepodge together by geniuses, and it just happened to be beautiful, not because it was designed, but because the information, the data that was being fed to it was naturally beautiful. And so that was an interesting thing that we kind of got into, and that's why we kept it black and white, which I personally love because you can't hide underneath this. When you make it black and white, a lot of times when you make like a UI or something, and Ryan knows this as well because he does this stuff as well, is like you can hide between like gradients and colors and all that kind of stuff. But this is so raw and honest that you really can't. You're faced with like dealing with the reality of the design, and everything has to matter, which also makes it really cool. And it makes it for just, it really is just beautiful art, really. So it's just cool. So yeah, I don't know, but you have any thoughts on that? The black and white, and working in this, because it's the first time I think we both done a complete thing all in black and white, basically. So
Yeah, it was actually really awesome because it's the kind of thing that I've wanted to do for a long time. Because I too like love black and white, and my color is one of those things. I look at it very much like a double-edged sword, where you just have to be so careful with it. And I feel like color is a very easy way to date things, and it's a very easy way to clutter things and distract from the design or to cover it up.
yeah,
Um, as much as it can also enhance and be beautiful. So like it does go both ways. But like when I'm working, I like to work in black and white for as long as possible on just about any project and just really focus on values and balance, and it just kind of like focuses things. And like if you can get a design to look and sit really well in black and white, when you start slowly adding in colors,
yeah.
uh, I just feel that much more secure with it, and like knowing that these colors are going to work, as opposed to just like throwing a bunch together. And that's, yeah, just in my life that's never ended particularly well.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, design is first inferred, the way we perceive information usually is inferred by value, first and foremost, and the use of light. In this case, we're using emitted like line particles basically that are emitting light. That's how we're able to perceive that information. But I agree. I think that this has got to be, for me, not just because it's the most recent, but it's my favorite film in the UI realm that I've ever worked on, because it's allowed us to just make art basically, and it fit the film. Like if you watch the film, you'll see it like perfectly matches to what's happening in a way where I've like, usually it's like, a big blinking red button or something like that. So it's like an evolved version of that, which I felt was really cool. It's almost like a Jackson Pollock painting. It's like he's painting stuff along the way, conveying information of something, like an abstract persona basically that's happening. So it's just like another patina on the world in the story. So, but yeah, that's a great way. And I think like if you're out there and you're curious about this, or you're like having problem with color, like, yeah, I mean, Ryan said it perfectly, and I do the same thing. I usually start with black and white, and then I slowly start adding in the colors, and then start building that up. The students in my classes will know that that's how the process works too for me too. Because once you have your values, then the rest of it will kind of naturally come about. And that's more or less about playing with what kind of emotions you're kind of playing, pushing and stuff. So, but I'm so happy because you can imagine if he was like, put a big red, like glowing orb thing in the middle to pulsate, and I mean, that would just be a bummer. It would cheapen the design. So he was amazing at that. He just let us do our thing. Yeah, do it. Let's see it. yeah. I mean, that doesn't look too bad because it's so solid. But yeah, once you put a mask on it, it's just like, oh, yeah.
I'll start somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And he was just, very rarely, and not to say anything about any of the other directors I had, but like, very rarely do you get a director that really believes and works with you in the art form and like really wants you to do that art and to be at that level too. So it's like instantly having that trust is really great. Yeah, there you go. Look at So, I mean, that's what's typical, So, yeah. So the next question is, new question, with such complex designs, how do you quickly compare iterations? Does something like the equivalent on layer comps exist in After Effects or something? Hour-long renders has to make this complex. You want to answer that, Ryan?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, managing complexity is a constant battle, and with these simulations, really the solid strategy is to start small. So I'll start with very few particles. I'll start, with just a handful and kind of get the movement down, and work with like in Houdini, you can render previews with what's called a flipbook. So it's similar to a play blast in Maya, or a handful of whatever they call it in different programs. But just starting small, doing low res renders, and then just kind of building it up in stages, and kind of working at that low level until I kind of get the shape that I like, and then when it's behaving in a way that I feel is, I don't know, you could almost call it trustworthy, like reliably. I'm like, all right, this is starting to behave the way I want. I will then crank it up and then kind of roll the dice on a longer, more detailed render.
Yeah,
But
so you can play it by ear.
yeah, like it's kind of like a soft science, like there's no one solution that's going to work for every situation. So it's like kind of, I'll take the geometry, like depending on what I'm doing, like in this case, it was the brain. So, I'll take the geometry, I'll kind of figure out how large it is, what the general shape is. I'll kind of like place an emitter, but the emitter could be a variety of shapes. And sometimes I'll use the geometry itself, like the surface as an emitter. So there is just kind of a lot of, just kind of going piece by piece, because every situation's different. But like the general strategy is to kind of start small, start with fewer particles, start with fewer effectors, and then kind of like slowly build it up in stages. And as like each stage kind of gets on its feet and looks good, I'll kind of like lock it off and then kind of build the next piece on top. And kind of keeping things separate like we've been doing here in After Effects, that helps a lot too.
We do a lot of stuff too where, like I mentioned earlier, there's another question about like seeing those tests and stuff. You'll see a lot of that, like those iterative passes before they go into motion go through with me designing those things too. So like I'll be like, Ryan, how about like, let's see like some of this stuff and some of that. And it's almost like we're like making soup together and like grab a little cilantro over there, put some potatoes in there, and it's basically like putting that together. And each one of those is bespoke to those custom things. Like a lot of times people will like, well, yeah, that's not UI. You can't see shit in that. I'm like, of course it isn't. It's part of a movie that's fictional. It makes no sense. We're just trying to tell a story here. It's not supposed to be applicable. And so what we're trying to do is convey exactly what that story needs to tell at that moment. And at this moment, from what I remember, this is when Cal gets the epidural plug into his head, and then he's going deep into the animus, basically, right? Is that right? What's going on? I can't remember if that's it. Because this is the feed, basically, I think, from what I remember.
Yeah, this is the epidural. So I'm going to get rid of this.
So like a quick example is like, so if you want to see iterative passes, it usually starts when we do stills. Those stills then get past, and then when you're going into animation, like Ryan's saying, he's just slowly building them up, watching them, seeing what's happening, feeling it out. And Ryan's like a veteran; he's got lots of years, obviously, and so he understands when to put the time, where, and how to use the resources valuably. You know, because when you're on like we were blasting, dude. There was like it was pretty quick. The amount of work we were putting out, and at the time, it was pretty freaking fast. So yeah.
Kind of see that in some of these projects.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, it's like, and plus it's your workflow too. So like when I work, I'm just like a big mess. Like I don't give a shit. Like on my own stuff, because I know I just, you know how it is. You feel what your project is. You don't have to. You're naming stuff at least, so that's not that bad. So I
Yeah.
even name stuff. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah, and it's key, and and that's a delicate balance that you learn over time, kind of like you're saying, like the difference between like how rigid you are, like with stuff like your naming convention and your folder structures, and kind of like learning to feel when it's important to be flexible and when it's important to kind of lock yourself into a more rigid pipeline. Because I've like in my experience, I've gone too far either way. Like there have definitely been projects where I was far too rigid, and like in the early days, and it kind of squelched creativity, and it kind of hurt the overall connection that the piece had, as
yep.
opposed to other times where you're just kind of shooting from the hip and just being like, oh, this feels cool. Let's just try this. And then you kind of end up with a big mess. And you're like, oh, crap, how do I finesse this into a final form? It's completely unworkable. So,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah, with experience too.
Yeah, it just comes with
That
time, you know?
balance.
Yeah, and working like, and I think that's one thing I think we excel at too, is that we were very open in communication. Like, be like, okay, Ryan, you need this by this, or whatever. If you need something from me, you need it by that certain time. We'll be very clear and open. Great work stems from great communication. I think too is very key. And yeah, I think we all at the same time, since we've worked on so many films and so many things together, there's just an unspoken bond that we're just like, oh yeah, this is right here, and then try that over there, blah blah blah, and like it's just like it's very natural, I think, and that's like just kind of like a working relationship that only really comes about from time. You get to see how people deal under stress, deal with problem solving, deal with like I think you've always been incredibly good about feedback. You don't usually take it personal, and you're just like, even when we get it from the director or something, I'll be like, damn it, like I don't want to do that or whatever. We're like, yeah, it's whatever, just keep moving. I'm like, damn, that's good. So that always kind of kept me inspired too, because I get kind of like stubborn, like I have a vision, and we must see this vision through, but you've always been really good at keeping us grounded on like just keep moving forward, and which is another really amazing trait that will keep you emotionally stable, I think, while doing this work, because it's such a roller coaster. But do you have any regrets like getting into this field? Is there times where you're just like, I hate this, or do you is it usually you just kind of like, okay, this is what I do? Are you happy working in the entertainment and creative industry?
Yeah, I would say, that's a kind of a complicated question, but yeah, like I would say overall, like I love what I do, like, and the projects vary so widely,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, like I'm fascinated by all of it, and I love like being able to kind of tap into both sides of the brain, and those are like the jobs I love the most, where it's like it's the technical and it's artistic work too.
Yeah.
And just kind of like why like it's so great like when we're working together, because like we're just some nice crossover, but then you're able to kind of like run wild with the creative stuff, and I'm able to kind of focus in on a lot more technical things, and which I think also gives me a bit of barrier with the feedback, where it's a little less personally, like I take it a little less personally. It's much more scientific for me in some ways.
Yeah, definitely. Which sometimes I think is really good, because then it kind of like isolates you to be able to focus on just the task at hand, rather than like navigating timelines and schedules and budgets and production and just the madness of chaos of that, which could be very noisy, because you do that as well. I mean, you run a lot of your own projects solo as well, and you know how complex that is, managing NDAs, contracts, schedules, production, timelines, budgets, all that kind of stuff. And if you get tied up, then you have to hire somebody else and see if they can help you, and resources, or your computer crashed or whatever it might be, so it's like infinite possibilities. But that's good to know. I mean, I feel the same way, and I think the thing that really keeps me active in this industry is like, you never know who's going to reach out to you, and you never know what you're going to do tomorrow, which is scary for most people, and I totally get that. But I think for us, we really love that, because it's like, oh, cool, what's the next challenge? Like for this challenge is like creating the most beautiful brain scan anybody's ever seen, you know, like, yeah, that's pretty much what it's supposed to be, you know, like for this particular design, exactly, you know, so every other, the timeline and everything else were completely different as well too. So yeah, but
Yeah. You do bring up a lot of interesting points though, because there is so much like that comes with freelance that is completely separate from actually doing the work. And
oh God,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely that part of things I could live without. And then that's the juggle of like, yeah, do you stay on your own doing your own thing as a freelancer, as a solo company, or do you go into the comfortable embrace of a corporate environment, which has its own huge set of trade-offs?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a definitely a learning curve, and it's not for the faint at heart to do this stuff because it's just, yeah, you got to have a supportive family, and it's a long journey to find your rhythm. I think I'm still trying to find it, slowly getting there. Another good question that's coming in is, if you don't know anything about coding and only a little bit of After Effects scripting, how hard is it to learn Houdini? This is actually good for you, Ryan, because you should also mention that you make scripts and stuff too, and definitely let me know where those links are so I could share them with everybody after the stream too. So
Oh, certainly.
yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would say if you're, I'm not sure if you're talking about scripting or writing expressions in After Effects, but either way, that is a fantastic place to start. I mean, that's really what got me going on all this stuff in the beginning was like After Effects, learning how to write expressions. And then the first script I wrote was like a camera rig because I kept like building the same rig over and over again with a null and a camera. And I'd write a wiggle expression with some sliders and like, animation presets weren't quite cutting it. So, I mean, that's a fantastic place to start. And if you can kind of get your mind around a little JavaScript and, write a script and get some objects to appear in a timeline in After Effects, I mean, you're in great shape. And as far as Houdini goes, you don't necessarily need to be a programmer or need to program in any language to get started because it is all node based. So, like, here's an open project. I mean, you can create, a box and you can dive inside of the network and create a transform. And then you can move your box around using the transform.
That's what he said.
If you're not on point mode, but there you go. See, so it's like it's already a different way of going because it keeps your history as nodes. So it's like as you work, each thing that you do is remembered, and then you can keep changing it and modifying it. And then if you wanted to, you could drop down something like a point wrangle and go in and start like writing code. So we can set the color of the points here. Make it red just by writing a line of code. So in this sense, it's really not far off what you would be doing in After Effects with expressions, except you have kind of this totally different signal flow. And then at any moment, you can get back to where you started. And if you wanted to go in a different direction, you could branch this off a different way.
How did you learn Houdini, Ryan? And why did you learn it? Like, were you like, okay, I'm fed up with this, or like, why did you turn to it for as a resourceful tool?
I had just slowly become aware of it over the years, and I'd seen the end result. Like I'd seen people doing incredible things with particle systems and point clouds. And with the popularity of plugins like Plexus and Form, in particular in After Effects, I started getting very interested in working with like particles and points in space. And I found Cinema 4D could be limiting in a sense because like I love Espresso in cinema, but there are like some limitations, and like with your networks, you end up with a bunch of small disconnected networks, and like the main UI is still kind of controlling all of your objects in your hierarchy. And like I would get very kind of frustrated with that disconnection, and you'd get like a lot of like crosstalk between Espresso rigs, and at that point, I started like just watching videos online about Houdini, and I watched a few kind of like getting started tutorial videos, just the stuff like available on the Side Effects website. And
Side Effects is a maker of Houdini,
yeah,
right? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, they're the creator. It's Side Effects, and you can down. They have a free version, they have an indie version, so it's pretty easy to get started if you're curious. And once I kind of realized that, and I was able to install it and start playing with it myself, I got hooked. And the thing that really got me was the attributes. And it's kind of a weird thing that I've never seen in another program, but each vertice, each polygon can have custom attributes, which sounds very abstract, but it allows you to do like anything, essentially.
Yeah.
What I'm doing here with the color is I'm setting the color attribute of these points, and it's turning red. So for a lot of the Assassin's Creed stuff, which I could kind of break up, like I use attributes extensively for a lot of these effects, and like even this one here, like this is the it's kind of hard to see probably because these are just like little number bits. And this is
Yeah.
a placement project, but again, like this is like heavily using attributes. So I have my grid coming in. I'm using an attribute wrangle here, and I'm getting the color, saving that as an attribute. I'm creating a luminance out of the color attributes, and I'm piping it back out as a new attribute called luminance. And then that is being sent upstream to a switch, which then divides it among all these different symbols, which you can't see because it's all white right now. But
Mm.
um,
Damn.
that switch then divides it and applies it to a grid, and you end up with this final result, which is all of the crazy numbers. So being able to attach like custom information to each vertice to each primitive allows you to do extremely like complex operations. So you're not like just modeling, you're actually like creating new pieces like in code as it goes. It's I don't know, it's super cool. Like once you kind of get the hang of like applying that information and retrieving it, manipulating it, and putting it back on the mesh and sending it upstream, it's a very eye-opening experience.
Yeah, I could. It just looks like it's super modular then, and you just your ability to change, augment, and stuff is just yeah, a whole another realm.
Yeah, it's almost like you're building circuits on a circuit board, and you have like the electricity flowing through it, or like water like kind of flowing through it, and then you're manipulating it, and branching it, mixing it back together. It's a
Yeah,
fascinating way to work.
we think completely differently. That's exactly. I'm like on a weird different realm compared to this. Yeah, so this is really. Yeah, what's this all about? Oh, these are you're saying the tags that are
So you're
identifying each piece.
point numbers on the number on
Oh
the
man.
number.
Don't no way. So each one of those points has a piece of data, and then that's also running through. So there's infinite power. So is it somewhat powerful? And what does it use as resources? Does it use memory or CPU, or depending on what process you're using? How what is it mainly consuming basically to do this calculation?
It's the CPU and GPU. It varies. Like different nodes and different processors will use different parts of your computer, but it's very efficient. And kind of one thing that's worth thinking about is the Vex language. Like it uses what's called Vex, which is the programming language. I don't know. I just kind of deleted that expression by accident, clicking around.
Uh,
Vex is it's a very interesting language. It's very similar to C in the C family of languages, and its real strength is in concurrent programming. So the way these wrangle nodes work is that you're actually processing multiple threads. It's like utilizing all the threads it can on your CPU to process these nodes concurrently. So it's extremely fast. So like if you're familiar with something like processing or open frameworks, you're doing like a lot of loops through vertices. When you're working with a grid of like 1,000 points, 2,000 points, your machine starts bogging down because it's like looping through them single file. But with Vex, you're working multi-thread, and it's extremely fast and powerful.
that's insane because it just allows like so much more variety, I guess, and control. And yeah, what the hell, man? Super gnarly though. Yeah, I think you'd. So when you're doing this, Ryan, like, where's your head at? Are you deep in the program, or are you thinking in your mind and like running cycles of thought in your mind, problem solving in your thought process, and then coming out here? Or do you write it out? I know that you also draw. In your sketchbook, do you keep like notes as you're going through all this kind of stuff? Like, how are you perceiving this thing? Because I have a different approach from you. I'm sure we all do. But when you're doing something like, let's say for this task, for example, how did you come to this conclusion? Was it a natural one, or is it something that you kind of manifested through sketches and thoughts in your mind or notes in the sketchbook?
It's kind of a mix. Like my inspiration, like this is a technique. I mean, this isn't a technique that I invented. This is this is included in like a great book that I love is Generative Design.
Mm.
There's some projects in there to teach you this. It's basically a pointilize effect. So it's something I learned back when I was studying processing originally. One of the early projects they teach you in various processing documentation and books is how to do a pointilize effect, where you take an image and you loop through the pixels, and then you replace them with shapes and symbols based on the brightness or the color values. So I kind of realized after working with Houdini for a little while that I could recreate that effect using Vex, and it would run extremely quickly. Because the big drawback with that effect is that it's very system heavy. So like theoretically, like a long time ago, I wrote a script in After Effects that essentially did the same thing because there are expressions where you can do a color sample on a layer and you can run that in expression. But once you're doing that on like an HD screen, you're getting like, a frame every minute or so.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brutal. So it kind of limits that. But then, yeah, having that realization that I could do this in Vex and would actually run quickly and I can run image sequences through it, I realized like it would be an awesome way to animate numbers because these numbers are actually driven by the brightness value.
That's
So I
awesome.
could actually like dial in specific numbers that I wanted by like knowing the ranges ahead of time for some of these animations.
Yeah, it's so cool.
So yeah, it's really powerful, and it's
Crazy powerful.
yeah, but it is very much piece by piece because I do it's a mix of kind of sketching things out and then also working with you. So I'll look at your drawings, I'll kind of see what you're thinking in your head, and then I'll start thinking of ways to animate them. And kind of like I like to again like start with the simple. So I'll be like, all right, so Ash is he's working in Photoshop, so I have like all these layers, and I'll kind of like go through your file. I'll look at the different pieces you have. I'll start kind of grouping them in ways that I think they'll move together. And then I'll kind of go piece by piece and I'll be like, all right, like these can remain 2D. Maybe I'll make this a 3D object. Like, how would I actually build that object? And then how would I make it move? And there's kind of like those two steps all along the way is like kind of figuring out like, how do we get that look? Like, how do we actually like generate this geometry? And then how do we add motion to that geometry?
Yeah.
And those are very much like two separate problems. And sometimes I'll end up using like multiple techniques for both. Like I'll kind of create the geometry using a few different things, and then I'll also move it using a mix of like destructive kind of techniques in 3D, kind of mixed with mattes and effects in 2D. And it's an iterative process, and it does kind of involve a lot of like going to paper, sketching it out, testing something, going back to paper, sketching it out, and kind of like learning from a few small tests, and then kind of taking those results and building something larger and more stable.
And that's a really interesting process too, because it's kind of like you're taking the workflow in which I think and work, and then you're matching it with this, and you're also thinking about farther out in the productions, so that you can use what you have as far as resources. And because if you had like a render farm or like infinites, you would be like, I don't give a shit, I'll just do whatever I want. But you have to think resourcefully, and
Yeah.
so that kind of gears and kind of infers your process in production and stuff, which is really good. So. Yeah, that's really good. And it's good for people to see this too in this workflow in this proper style, because it's like, well, we all have different workflows in the way we work, and just because Ryan works like this doesn't mean that you have to necessarily. It helps, of course, but I think at the same time, like we all have different processes, and you've naturally kind of come about your process, your workflow, because you not only do you use After Effects, but you also do scripts for After Effects, and you sell scripts that you make for After Effects, which are really awesome. We'll talk about that in a minute. But you also you work in cinema. You're really proficient in cinema, and you use Houdini now. What was I going to say? There was another thing I was going to talk about. But you have like a workflow between all of them, and you also use like InDesign, Photoshop, of course, as we all do. And that's a given. But damn, I lost my track of thought. Oh well, I'll come back to me. I have to plug in the Cal's neurological brain scan in my head and pump up the juice, pump up the jam. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's pretty crazy, man. Like I shared that book. There's one of our students, an awesome guy, Tim Zarkey. He's the student that I showed you that figured out kind of how to recreate that effect that you're using here. You remember I sent you, I was like, look at this, they're figuring it out. And
Yeah.
so that was Tim. So Tim also suggested another book. I'm not sure if you know, it's called The Nature of Code, Simulating Natural Systems with Processing.
Oh yeah, yes, I've been meaning to buy that one actually.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I
Looks
don't know
like
if you had it or if you liked it and stuff. So, but yeah, so that's that.
yeah. No, that looks like a really good book. I mean, that one has like a lot of really nice looking algorithms in it, which goes a really long way in Houdini. That's part of the reason I love this generative design book is that although all the code is written in Java, it's written in I don't say JavaScript, it's Java, it's for processing. A great project, especially like learning Houdini, is like kind of pulling those Java projects, converting into the Vex language. You learn a lot like within that process, and then you have a really cool Houdini rig that you can take in many directions.
So beast, so beast. So this is something that you've generated in After Effects, like a noise emulator. Is that what that is? And
Yeah, so like kind of popping the hood on this a little more. I realized this is a slightly better project to look at. So it kind of starts with a grid. Let's put that on Wireshape. As you can see, the density of the grid here, it's pretty dense. and I project UVs onto it, and then I use this attribute node. So I am attaching a texture using the UV coordinates and then applying the colors to the vertices. So now this very simple noise texture that I animated in After Effects, just using fractal noise, a handful of masks, really simple techniques. It's mapped onto the plane. And then I have all my numbers here. And each number is a little piece of geometry.
Yeah, there we go. That's cool.
A switch object. And this switch is basically looking at the luma value created in this attribute wrangle. It's being piped through the copy using a stamp, which is, I won't dive into that now. It's just some kind of standard Houdini stuff. So you can send an attribute back upstream. And then it just uses that luma value to divide between these numbers. So it's saying how many inputs do I have in this, let's see, how do I open that up? Alt-E. I don't know if you can read this, it's really tiny. But this is just a little expression that's just looking at how many inputs are going into the switch. And then it's dividing that by the current luminance value. And then that value basically notches each of these where it needs to be, and then I can copy them back to the plane, and then these numbers will match the incoming luminance values. So you can see these bright points are higher numbers.
That's awesome.
And then if I can also adjust the level, so I can start multiplying these brighter or dimmer.
Huh.
By turning up this level, it's now cranking the incoming luminance values and creating higher numbers on that number.
Awesome.
On that noise pattern.
It's basically augmenting the value of the contrast and the luminance, basically, like you said, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That way you can control it easily with the switch and get infinite augmentations. Then that's crazy.
Yeah. So as I add symbols to the switch, it'll update itself with the formula. So I don't have to put in a bunch of numbers. I just add a new one, and it automatically looks at it and redoes the math and figures it out. And that's actually why I added some blank spaces too, because when I initially did it, the black spots would automatically go to 0 because that was the low number. I was like, oh no, I want those to be blank. So I just added a blank slot. It bumped everything up a notch and worked great.
Yeah, that's awesome. Super cool. I will say we should also mention that one of the things that was really cool is taking all this amazing things that you were creating, the renders and everything that we had put together, and then going to Kevin's house, our buddy. So it's funny, we all kind of came full circle again because Kevin Jolson is our friend. He was my DOP on a couple of projects I worked on. He's an awesome guy. Him and his wife Rebecca, they are cinematographers. They work together, and I hired them to. He just got his red dragon. Is he using a dragon? I can't remember what it was. I can't keep up with that stuff.
Oh yeah, it had some crazy name. It was new red. I think it was filming.
Oh yeah, some kind of
6K. It was ridiculous.
6K, yeah, it was crazy. But the thing I think really because one of the ideas I was selling Justin on is it wasn't just going to be flat graphics. Remember I was talking about that? It wasn't going to be flat or right. Just because before it was just flat and looked really shitty. And I was like, no, let's use the camera and let's rack focus and focus on areas. And then we'll give you so much information you can just slice that into your edit with your editor. And that was kind of another selling point that really took that. Because what we see here now from Ryan, there's so many pieces that Ryan had gone off and custom made that I was like, oh, let's just take a picture of that. Let's take a picture of that. And then what I ended up doing is I'd take these amazing things, put them in Photoshop, make a still image, make a piece of geometry in Cinema, like a plane, and then go into Octane, make a custom camera, take photographs of it basically in Cinema, and then show those to Justin and be like, this is what we should do. And Justin was so cool. He was like, why don't you just shoot what you think it needs to be? And then I'll take those things and then we'll put them in the film. And it was just, again, a perfect storm situation where he was letting us do what we do best, didn't get in the way necessarily, and let us kind of go and play with it. So I think that's another thing to mention, because the stuff that's actually in the film, I think almost 99% of it was shot in camera. And that just gives it a whole nother variety. And the reason why we didn't use traditional, just using a CGI render, is because what we did is we bought a 4K monitor and shot with the Red Dragon at 6K or whatever red, and then we used Kevin had these beautiful Zeiss 100mm macro lenses that were just incredible, and they had this beautiful fall off bokeh that would come off, and you just can't get that natural fall off in the split of the RGB on each pixel in the 4K monitor. I'm getting super nerdy, but you can't even touch that shit with CGI yet. I mean, you can get close, but not close enough. And that was another layer. So it was awesome designs, awesome execution of the production of it, and then getting it photographed like that was just like, pff, this is like, yeah. I remember.
It's a whole new layer to it. I mean, it's not
Yes, it
like what
does.
you do when you're recording an album, you know, like if you're recording a guitar, it's better practice to put a really high quality microphone in front of the speaker as opposed to recording the direct line in because you get the sound of the speaker, you get the audio mixing with the room, mixing with the air, you get the quality of the mic, and it all applies with the screen, the lens.
Yep.
It's yeah, it does. It adds so much like warmth.
Warmth, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because it's like this stuff is so rigid and perfect. You know, like you've done an amazing job to make this feel organic, but it still has that perfect computer calculative feel to it. But it's that's another thing I think is important to just add into that equation. So, what do you got here?
This is the brain.
Hmm.
Some of the brain scan stuff.
Oh, I will also say that we, when we, the brain that we used, I think was like an asset that I bought off of like some sort of like 3D asset, I don't know, some kind of thing. And then we also bought footage off of, I think it was Getty. Yeah, there's the brain scan. So this is the time I wasn't using ZBrush, and I don't even, I think I can make something like that in ZBrush at this point anyways, but nor would I want to. So, but it's quick enough to just buy an asset. So we ended up buying that asset. The asset was actually pretty good, right? I mean, it had it decently broken up into all the right pieces and stuff, which is really good. So yeah, this is a killer asset. So ended up buying that. That way we used all these assets, and you can kind of like, yeah, looks really cool. And then we also bought that footage, right? Those brain scans that would go in Z space. And that's what kind of we were using to kind of feed the information for those feeds. But you ended up making your own, I think, right?
Yeah,
The
like
cutaways, cut throughs.
I feel like a lot of that original video footage, I don't know how much of that we actually used. I think some of it got sent through the pixel
Money well
replacement.
spent, yes.
Yeah, well, we sent it through the pixel replace effects, but then I think in the end we wound up having so many layers that yeah, the dominant portion was stuff that was coming out of Houdini.
Mm.
Um,
That's awesome, though. I mean, that was basically the effect we were going for, which is like a traditional MRI scan. Because Justin liked the idea of an MRI scan, but we're like, let's throw it through Animus, which is throwing it through this whole system. So, yeah. All right. So this looks really crazy. This is an even more complex piece. So this is kind of like similar to, I guess, like Atom Array inside Cinema 4D, but it's totally custom, obviously, because it's Houdini. So. Yeah, what are you doing here? Yeah.
Oop, I'm kind of pushing my luck here. Here we go. Yeah, so I was just kind of busting out this model. So let's see if we can kind of go through it, kind of follow the flow. Because that's kind of the fun part about Houdini is that you can kind of go back to the beginning. So it really starts kind of with this incoming mesh. And what's one nice thing about Houdini that I also haven't seen in other applications is they have a take system. So if you have a scene set up the way you like it, but you want to change like one parameter or two parameters, you can create a new take. And it's basically a layer on top of your project, and then you can tell it where you want just the changes to be. So in this case, I'm able to switch which brain layer I want just by adjusting my takes. And then I can have a bunch of settings that apply to all takes, but then I can have just different brains kind of going through, which is really handy when it comes to rendering as well. Kind of a side journey here. Because I can have lots of different render pipelines that I can then group and pipe all these different pieces out to disk without having to go one by one. I can just kick it off overnight.
That's awesome.
It's another crazy superpower for Houdini. But kind of back to the task at hand, you can see it's like the model flows in and it kind of branches off in all these different directions where I'm essentially, all right, I need to go to my main take here just while I'm working. Where I'm kind of slicing grouping, so you can kind of take that geometry, you can remove everything except the points, and then I'm actually scattering more points in there and kind of grouping them. And what I'm doing is actually using these scattered points to adjust the brightness of the surrounding points.
So you can have like variety on like a clustering and stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Here we go. So here we get into some more interesting moments. So here's where the attributes are actually transferring. So it's like I have one set of points kind of branching off and receiving a set of attributes and groupings. And then that's mixing back in with this web of points. So I have another set of points, which are being connected. And then I have these attribute transfer happening, essentially, where one set of attributes is set, another set of attributes is set, and then they are blended together to create a lot more visual interest.
Is that a noise deformer that you're using? Some sort of noise deformer? That's, I mean, it's obviously code like you were showing, but how do you do that with the luminance so you can see like clusters? That's so
Yes,
cool.
actually,
I just want to
scatter.
like see renders of all this stuff. That's cool right there. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So these are the actual points. So these points
That's
have a
so
brightness
cool.
value attached to them,
Wow.
and they're mixing in with these points here.
F.
Oh, there's my timer going off.
Oh, sorry. Do you have to go?
No.
You have 15 minutes?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm
Okay.
okay.
Okay, good. All
It's
right.
just a repeating timer for general.
Yeah, I do the
General.
same thing. Yeah,
So you can see it's actually the one set of points is creating the pockets of brightness in the other.
that's
So like the
awesome.
random pattern is created by the placement of those points in space, and they're passing their brightness to the other points based on their distance, which creates this like three-dimensional noisy look. So you can see like if you kind of keep your eye on these
Yeah,
points when it's turned on, you can see the brightness.
it's
They
like
kind
little
of
lights then. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
so they're
cool.
like little tiny lights, and
So
then
it
that's
is
all.
kind of like noise, I guess. Kind of like a noise deformer, I guess.
It
But it's
is.
more complex. Not more complex. Actually, doing the same thing. It's just a different route to get there, I guess. Right.
Yeah, and I'm able to attach more information to it. So although like it's noise with information that can be piped downstream and used for other purposes later. Um,
That's cool.
so here's kind of where I'm doing the slice, where I have kind of a grid and a cube, and they are essentially grouping points. So I kind of create the entire brain
Hmm.
and then slice through it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if I was kind of slicing through it and then creating all these points, the points jump around too much. That's actually how I had it originally set up, and I realized I wanted it to be more flowing and static and dreamlike. It was way too chaotic that way. So I actually flipped the stream, build the whole structure, and then slice through it later.
So it would be less chaotic because I think that's based on the notes that he would give us back. Yeah, and then there we go.
And then I have my nice slice that behaves
That's
the way I want
cool.
it to. And then I can kind of send that out to kind of the cool bit, which is where I create my corner connections.
Oh,
So
yeah,
now
that's right. Yeah, yeah,
I kind
yeah,
of send you guys out based on where they're located on the quadrants,
yeah.
creates different corner connections
Oh,
for
so
different
cool.
groups. And these corner connections are being created by the same points that are creating the bright spots. So it's all connected, which is kind of what I mean when I say like sending the attributes downstream, is I'm using these points to create the bright spots, but then I'm using them again later to create the connections.
Yeah, that's awesome. And to further elaborate on those connections too, in the early days of talking to Justin about this, I was thinking it would be really cool. And so I started putting the designs. I thought it'd be really cool that there would be quadrants of the brain in which the animus would be feeding information. So as let's say you're operating the animus, and I think this is one thing that Ryan and I are very big on is we create false like fictional logic behind the designs so that they have when you make designs you have to have a reason why. If you don't, then you're just like you're making nothing basically. So to avoid that like void like space of just nothingness, what we did is start building narrative about around the machine of how the animus works. So in this scene where that Ryan's showing, you have quadrants basically, and so the animus would kind of show like, there's a neurological pathway going off in the frontal cortex. There's some that are going off in the lower right and then the lower left or whatever, and so there's different areas that are feeding more information. And so that idea, I was like, Ryan, let's maybe try something like this, and then I would make the designs, get it approved by Justin, then Justin go, yeah, that's amazing, let's do that. Then I'd kick that back to Ryan, then Ryan would figure out how to engineer that to put that into production. This is exactly what you're seeing here. So you're having these nodes connect to different quarter vertices, which is like insane, really it is. So, and the idea is that every part of that, as the brain's scanning through Cal's head or Aguilar or whatever, as the animus is gathering and sifting, because what in our minds the animus was this massive data collect basically, but it's very old, and so it's grabbing pieces and it's correlating information and it's trying to convey them between pulling ancestor information, then projecting it into the now to get Cal to go into that next abstract world, so he can do parkour all over the roofs and shit and stuff. So parkour. But yeah, so that was kind of the idea. So those corners and everything that we've put into the design, it all means something to us. Like it all is, it all has a meaning basically. I don't think with this project we ever did something like, let's just do it because it's cool. It all had a reason. You can see it as Ryan's firing it up. Every one of those quadrants, it's like at the upper right hemisphere, there's a new quadrant that happens. So that's like signifying, and then it's shifting based on like information, so that a technician that's operating the Animus can go like, okay, hold on, let me freeze this. If there's an error, or they can go like, oh, there was an error at like this part of his sequence. We can go and find out where it was, how it was, and find out if it was like a file error issue or some sort of like file correlation or information correlation issue or anything like that. And so you just have to keep going really deep into it, I think. And creating your own narrative, I think, really helps, because if we didn't do that, what do you think it'd be? It'd be like just really, it would be all over the fucking place. It'd be a big giant mess, really. So
Yeah, exactly. It's easy to make a big mess, especially like when you're working with such powerful tools.
Oh God, yeah.
You can just generate tons and tons of stuff and just fill up your disk with garbage.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we know that. We know that for sure, because we do that sometimes in our own personal projects. As we explore, we just go, okay. But I think when something actually has a reason behind it, it makes it makes much more sense. So
Yeah, and there's definitely a place for generating stuff and experimenting too,
yeah,
So
of
it's
course.
a balancing act.
Yeah, how much time, and I'm gonna start going into some questions too, but how much time do you find that, I mean, it's probably much more difficult and different for you now that you're a new dad, juggling that, but do you make time still to learn things, or do you learn on the job? And how do you approach things like this? Do you find it, because sometimes I love to learn on the job if I have the time to do it, but obviously time is a different thing for you now because your priorities have shifted significantly, so yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Like, that's a good point. I think I'll tell you this, like I always have my reference manuals open. That's something I've learned over the last few years. And the more I think that you get into code, the more you have to do that, because it's impossible. Like you kind of reach a point you realize it's impossible for anyone to hold all of this information in their head at once. And you really you kind of learn that like the real key skill is to understand how to use the reference. So like Houdini has a lot of good reference. Like any of these nodes, you can hit the question, it'll like pull up the help manual. And you kind of have to work like that because it's so complicated and there's so much like abbreviation and just like kind of quirkiness that's evolved over the years that like the strategy that'll work, that I find kind of works across the board with things like Houdini and just kind of coding and stuff. Always kind of take a step back, figure out what you're trying to achieve, figure out what the proper vocabulary is for what you're trying to achieve, and then kind of research it piece by piece and find the good reference for what you're looking up, and then kind of hang on to it, and like bookmark it, and always just kind of have it there when you're working. And like kind of when you get in that state and you're like, oh, how am I going to figure this out? Just go to the reference, because someone's already figured it out. You'll learn a little something and it'll turn out like even better than you were expecting.
Yeah, definitely.
And I always try to so it's both for me. It's like I'm always learning as I go, and I'm always problem solving and looking at the manual on the job. And then, if I'm fortunate enough to have some time off and I have a little time to myself, I definitely explore a lot of things in my free time, such as like Unity, or like I'm very interested in programming languages too. So like I'm always like kind of just looking at different languages and seeing how they approach these tasks, and kind of trying to learn just like different perspectives on these things, because it's kind of like the more you look into it, the more you realize how many similarities there are, like between applications and between languages and between these tasks.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's like, so it's like a never-ending cycle.
It really is.
Yeah, that's what's cool about it, though.
Like finding things you're interested in, and then I'll also try to do self-reflection, where I'll kind of like look back on a project and be like, something bite me in the ass on this project. All right.
How often do you do that?
Yeah, and I'll dive in and I'll just learn everything I can. So like, there was a time when I was not super comfortable with like materials or UVs, so I was like, screw it. I am just like diving in and I'm going to figure this thing out once and for all.
Yeah.
Just go. Yeah.
Still a pain in the butt. Yeah.
It's still a pain. It's unpleasant.
Yeah. Well, using it depends on your pipeline, obviously. And there's a lot of new resources. Have you tried out like Substance Designer? And there's a couple, like I think Quixel is one of them too. 3D Coat has an amazing UV unwrapper too that I've seen.
And then just kind of like really understanding like UVs at a fundamental level and like how they work and like what they're doing will help you work with whatever tool, and then you can kind of start judging the tools for the job more appropriately, like once you like really kind of understand the underlying mechanics.
Yeah, definitely. And it just helps to have that, definitely. Okay, let's get into some questions. There's quite a few, so we're just going to try smashing through them. this question's for me, but I think we can both answer it because I think it's applicable for both of us because we do a lot of the similar things. So, do you have a set way of working when working on collaborative projects, or does it vary depending on the project and the people involved? You want to hit that one?
Oh boy, yeah, it varies. I would say task to task, but yeah, communication is definitely key, and yeah, like it always helps to kind of show stuff like early with the people you're working with, and yeah, rarely is it good to kind of silo off for a few days on your own and then kind of show stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
But
I
yeah,
agree.
I
Yeah,
do, but yeah, it depends on the task, and it is always good to like when you can find people to work with that have complementary skills. I feel like that's a really powerful thing, where like each person has you're able to communicate well, but then you each kind of have your own strengths and specialties, and you can kind of find a way to get those to fit together and create something that's greater than either of you on your own.
yeah. The best part of teamwork is finding somebody that complements your weaknesses with their strengths, and obviously, like seeing what Ryan's doing here, like sure, I guess I could probably learn Houdini and stuff, but my brain doesn't. I just don't think and operate like that. I'm just different in the way, and I have to appreciate that. And I think that's another thing for everybody out there too. If you're seeing what Ryan's doing and you feel like shit, don't worry because I feel the same way. So I'm like, damn, I can't do that with that. I guess I probably could. It's just a matter of like dedication to it, and you have a different way of learning and going and attacking things too, and also just a strong drive and a love for this stuff, which is like maybe my strong love and drive is for different things, like maybe I just want to draw or something.
Yeah.
Whereas you want to figure out how to build like this crazy system that is like augmented and you can do all kinds of interesting things. Like I think both are valued in their own right, which is good. So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's just
Yeah, and
different.
like having them work together is so important.
Yeah, exactly. I think in regards to communication and collaborating with everybody, every project's different. Like with Ryan, like I have like crazy trust with Ryan. I'm just like, all right, well, here's some weird stuff. Like, have fun. And then Ryan's like, oh, I figured this out. I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, this is like Christmas because we're equally passionate about our different roles. And for this one, as an example, because we're going over it, it's like we were equally passionate about our different set of tasks, and we were just like super dedicated, like my goal with this project was to learn how to communicate the best that I possibly could with the director, earn his trust every freaking pass. I wanted to earn his trust for both Ryan and I wanted to design some of the best things I've ever made. And I just felt really like, I feel proud of it, like I'm still at this point, I'm like, I'm very proud of what we did. So every project's different though. So yeah. I think it really breaks down to communication and having partners that complement your weaknesses with their strengths. Another question that's coming in, Ryan, don't let us forget to share your AE plugins and stuff people are asking about. I'll definitely hit that at the end. I'll have you send me a link and I'll share it with everybody. You mentioned that you guys both worked at Sony SD and obviously we worked on Call of Duty and IW. With your experience working on both film and games, do you still see a difference between the mediums with regards to design and concepts and execution? Are they one and the same with how you approach your solutions? They're so different. Video games are so different, right? I mean, Ryan works on video games too, so we can answer this as well. It's like there's a completely different dynamic, obviously. And so I try to, for me personally as a designer, I try to push everything into a really different realm. I go like, well, why don't we question the norm here? Or can we try different things? And then, but then it always comes down to like visibility, clarity, usability. All these kind of things are very important. And so most of the times the design gets pared down to the most minimal thing, which is fine. It's totally great. Because a lot of this stuff, like, people always like, oh, this is too complex or this and that. This is not UI. And yes, of course, it isn't UI. It exists in a false world that it's called a movie, and it doesn't have the same parameters that we have, like an iPhone. But that's kind of, for me, they're completely different things. But I approach it the same way as design, like anything. If I were to design a movie poster, or if I were to design a video game UI or whatever, it's all the same. We should talk about meta too at the end if you want to, if you feel comfortable. So yeah.
No, that's fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it'd be fun.
You bring up a lot of good points to that answer because there is a lot of overlap, but then there are differences. Because yeah, like in games, like it's almost like games do like include like a bit of the movie thing where it's like they only care about the look because there are cutscenes. So like I've worked on cutscenes for video games, and that is very much like a movie approach. But then yeah, when you're designing things to work in the world, there's also that whole layer of like functionality, readability, and then also implementation, which comes with a lot of limitations on all systems. Kind of have their own quirks, and everyone like all the engines, like different companies use different engines and have different capabilities. So
Yeah.
there's another layer to kind of think about with games. Whereas in movies, like all that energy is just put double down on the aesthetic and the
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, games are just another dimension of complexity, I feel, yeah, it's just a whole another realm. They're all very similar though, and I think Ryan and I share the same value in our approach to certain things too. So, next question: what software was used to render the UI assets? Do you use C4D with Houdini engine, just Houdini? They also said, sorry if this was already asked already and they missed it. So I don't think it was just necessary to ask. You didn't talk about rendering, so
No, we didn't.
yeah.
Yeah, like rendering was Houdini. So I used the built-in Mantra render in Houdini, and actually wound up sending a lot of stuff to Grid Markets, which is a cloud rendering service.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it gets a little pricey, but
Yeah, it was expensive.
did
I
the
remember
trick.
that. I was
It get a
like,
little
damn,
expensive, but they're good. I mean, they'll pull it off.
that's
And
good.
kind of the thing is, like, I actually discovered this recently. I started using Octane in Houdini, which is really, really cool.
Hmm.
Except it doesn't let you do these really cool point effects because the mantra render in Houdini allows you to set point colors and it will render points and lines natively. So you're able to like set all these complex attributes and it actually renders them out. And I realized that Octane does not. So there actually wouldn't be a way to sidestep those render times.
That
But
sucks.
what's super nice about Houdini's renderer, though, is whether you're using Octane or not, is that you have this node-based structure and you're able to group objects. So it's like you're actually able to have an output node and you can tell it exactly which object you want it to render on its own and just kind of group all those to sequences. So
That's cool.
it makes rendering beautiful. Like I've never seen anything like it.
That's really cool. Again, it's like another way of having just more power to have control over what you want when you want to have it. So I guess it's probably somewhat comparable to like automatic cars and stick shift car, I guess, like one's a little bit more of a bitch to learn and get used
Mhm.
to. But then like when you're using it right, it's like nothing beats it. And then, but the automatic is just kind of like, boom, you get to go, but it's just a different experience. So, and they both work. They're both totally fine. I guess that's maybe kind of a assessment, I guess. I don't know, but that's good to know. Yeah, that's cool. You're getting Octane. I remember showing you a bunch of stuff like, oh, Octane, sending you stuff. So that's cool. Yeah, it's definitely it's a powerful tool. I love the feedback. It's so important to have that feedback, and I'll
Yeah.
probably get into that on some later streams too. So, is Houdini production ready for a motion graphics studio? We do have a farm. I'm pushing it at my company, but others are concerned about the amount of time it can consume to see results. An interesting question. It's really open-ended too. So obviously Ryan, go for it.
Like is Houdini a mature enough software to be used at a production level? Like absolutely.
Yeah,
Like it's
it
used
already
by
is.
giants. I mean, yeah, it's used extensively in movies and games. Like Guerrilla Games, they do Killzone and Horizon Zero Dawn. They like exclusively use Houdini. Uh,
That's a company that you work for. That's one of your big clients, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I worked with them on Shadowfall and Horizon Zero Dawn that's coming out later this year. So did a lot of like previs and kind of UI and like a lot of holograms and kind of cool effect stuff for them. That was a lot of fun. Again, like
Awesome.
a lot of Houdini work, kind of taking some game assets and kind of bringing them into Houdini out of the game engine and then running all sorts of effects on and kind of feeding it back through After Effects. Somewhat similar flow to what we did for Assassin's Creed, but again, kind of with those game target caveats in mind, where it's like they're going to need to implement this. I'm going to like kind of overshoot it a little bit on the look and reel it in, but we still have to stay a little bit more grounded than you would on the film.
Yeah. Awesome. That's good. Well, there you go. I mean, that's exactly it. And that's from what I've seen from other people too. Like Adam Swab uses it. They use it at his studio quite frequently. We used it. I remember it being used at Prologue when I was there. So
Mm-hmm.
another question is, have you used Touch Designer?
Oh, yeah. Oh, great question. I love Touch Designer. Yeah, that's an offshoot of Houdini.
Hmm.
So it's like a real time, yeah, Derivative branched off a few years back, and it's like a real time focused version of Houdini that's then kind of like branched off into all sorts of weird ways. But yeah, Touch Designer is awesome. You can hook up like MIDI keyboards and video game controllers and video projectors and just go crazy with it.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, I love it. I mean, I haven't had really any jobs that have been able to utilize it in a few years. Like it's always kind of fallen more towards video or possibly Unity, but man, I do love it. Absolutely.
Sick. Awesome. I've heard a lot about it. People have told me to check it out. I'm just taking like one program at a time. I'm like trying to really master ZBrush right now. So I'm like, okay, everything else has to stop, and I'm just gonna focus on this right now because I have a problem. If like I start to go too far on, do different things, it creates weird patterns in my head, and then I don't learn anything. So, but again, everybody else is doing their own thing. So, but it sounds like that it would be like the learning curve is a little bit more forgiving in Touch Designer.
Yeah, possibly because you're not dealing with rendering and it's a lot more real time driven.
That's cool.
So you do kind of like get to those results a little bit quicker. And yeah, like the rapid feedback definitely helps with the learning curve, like being able to see things a little bit quicker.
Kind of like processing, I guess, in some like early like top level processing, I guess, not deeper into it, but maybe, I guess. No.
Yeah, I think it's node based. There's a bit less code, so it's yeah, I would say touch design is pretty approachable. Like it's probably is like a little more approachable than Houdini out of the gate. But again, it also kind of comes down to the documentation. But they're both great programs. Again, like kind of different targets of like pre-rendered versus real time.
Sure. Yeah, and it's like one's like good for like I guess concert visuals or some sort, I guess, or some so.
Oh yeah, like installation or a concert, like working with a band or something. That would be
Yeah,
great.
fun
Touch design.
stuff. Yeah, I think G-Monk and a lot of his like collaborators they use that. What are the benefits of using or differences of using particles in Houdini versus X particles in Cinema 4D? Do you use X particles?
I do at times. I love X particles.
Yeah,
I would
that's
say.
awesome. It's really robust.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry, there's a little cut in there. You were saying?
Oh yeah, I would say the reason to go to like I would say X particles is going to get you a result a lot quicker. But if you need a deeper level of customization, then Houdini is going to give that to you. So like Houdini is going to give you control. Like it's going to be a little more difficult to set it up in the short term, but in the end, you're going to be able to do more with it. Um, and possibly get a better result. But it's going to be more work, like it's going to take a lot more setup. And obviously the learning curve for Houdini is a lot steeper than X particles.
Hmm.
So, different goals. Like if your goal is to just get like a really badass particle system really fast, then you're probably going to have more luck with X particles in the short term. But, if you're looking to like really build some crazy stuff that's never been seen before and is like, people look at it and be like, that's impossible, then, you're going to get that like through Houdini.
Yeah, because then you can augment it and have like multiple iterations and stuff like as you're showing us. Okay.
Yeah.
What sites do you usually go to when searching for reference in coding?
Oh, boy, that's kind of all over the place. Like, I'll tell you what, man, like Stack Overflow is probably always open in a tab somewhere because, like, especially if you're in JavaScript and After Effects land, you can probably find an answer to just about any JavaScript question on Stack Overflow.
Stack
Um,
Overflow. Yeah.
then I'll also
Reference.
go to like just with the official website of whatever tool I'm using. So like if I'm in Houdini, I'll have the side effects website open. I'll have their documentation open. And then if I'm working in a particular language, I'll also just find, I'll usually start with the official website for that language. So like C Sharp, I'll sometimes have like the Microsoft.NET open. Or again, for C Sharp, I often go to Stack Overflow for a lot of those answers. And then Houdini, I mean, I would say my one complaint about Houdini is that you cannot Google answers for anything because they have a strong defense on their website. So it's like you have to have the application open and then you have to go through their help.
Hmm.
And then, God forbid, you have a Python error with their help window and then you're just kind of stuck resetting a bunch of stuff trying to find an answer. So that's one thing to think about. Like reference is key.
That's kind
So
of a
there's
bummer.
a level of complexity with Houdini.
Hmm.
But they have a lot of good videos and yeah, it is kind of specific. So again, like if I'm on open frameworks, I'll have their forum and their documentation open. I'm in Houdini, all side effects, and then yeah, I'll Google language specific stuff, and 99% of the time, Stack Overflow is the first best answer you'll find.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
really cool. I mean, it's just a matter of using those resources, but those two things are good to know. So there you go. Whoever asked that great question. With software and technology changing, we have a couple more, and then we're going to wrap it up. With software and technology changing so frequently, are there any timeless skills you think every creative person should invest in? No, really great questions there, you guys. This is a great one. Go ahead, Ryan.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, like all the fundamentals, like light and shadow and form, and just like yeah, I mean that absolutely translates. And the stronger understanding you have of those things, and also like we kind of touched on a little bit here and there is drawing and paper. Can't stress that enough, like the power of it. And like
Yeah.
when I have time off, I love to get lost in a sketchbook and to do life drawings and to just like kind of lose myself in those things because you do learn so much. And like working constantly in the digital world, I find like as powerful as it is, it can also kind of stunt some of your thinking and kind of like you almost find yourself thinking on rails and kind of like breaking out of that and kind of shedding all digital things and like really going to like the fundamentals of aesthetics and beauty and art and visuals. Definitely it's a positive thing. Like when I get the chance.
Yeah. No,
Oh,
that's sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I was just gonna say like all of those fundamental skills. I think translate the more understanding you have of them.
Yeah, I think it just opens up another pocket of your mind, the way your mind works and thinks. Like as I'm learning how to model in 3D or UV or whatever, it opens up different pockets of. So when I draw, it's just more information basically, and if you can put them in the right passageways, I think it's good. So, I think a good trait
Tracy,
for. Sorry, what was that?
kind of touching on something that kind of a phase we went through like a couple years ago, the geometry and just studying like traditional geometric forms and getting out the compass and the ruler and Pythagoras.
Yeah, it's and a lot of the times this all just stems from people being creative and wanting to do creative things and like wanting to like really just question what they have and try different things and like open up their ideas and their minds to different possibilities of things and like really open up like just different solutions to things and trying to question like what the norm is and seeing like if there's something that they could do that could be augmenting their reality. A lot of times we talk about Da Vinci here, at least I talk about him all the time, and I think the thing that makes him brilliant, or he was brilliant, is that he wasn't really an artist necessarily. He was just mostly just a very curious person. Of course, he was an artist and a drafts person, but he was very inventive and very curious. And if anything, he was just very he was very curious about everything around him. And I think that's really important attribute to being a creative in this day and age and every day and age at any time in your life. And I think it's great to question authority, think for yourself. A little quote from Timothy Leary, I believe. And at the same time, be curious about everything that's around you. I wouldn't say like there's been a lot of questions in this chat today about like, is Houdini better than Cinema 4D? That's not the question you should be asking. The question I think you should be asking is like, what do I want to do with the work that I want to do? What makes me happy? And go from there. And you'll find through your solutions of solving and problem solving, you'll end up where Ryan and I are at. Like where we're pretty damn happy and content with where we are. There's always going to be a challenge over the hump the next day, but all in all, like we're finding the solutions to the things that we like, and we're just going through them as we go. So yeah,
That's true. There's always a new toy and a new tool and a new distraction. So
yeah,
it's
always. Yeah, and it's just mostly about being curious. I really think that's the key here. It's about being curious and looking for the things that you need. Another big question. This is don't like I was toying with it in the beginning, but a lot of people were asking about if you would ever teach, if and when. Just if that's something on your radar, if it's something of consideration. I know, I mean, Ryan and I have been friends for a long time. We've been talking about this for a bit. But yeah, if that's something that you've been thinking about, I know it's a time consuming thing. So yeah.
I have been thinking about it, and I would say this has been pretty fun. So, yeah, I mean, if people are interested, that's something I'd definitely be interested in talking more about and pursuing. I mean,
Awesome.
definitely, with work and the family, there are time constraints, but yeah, if people are interested in this kind of stuff, like, I geek out on it. So it is not hard to fill an hour with me just going off on Houdini and points in space. So,
Yeah, there you go, guys. So, yeah, I think it'd be really cool. I think it would just open up a new possibility because a lot of these projects, Ryan is my other half. He's the person that manages to take this stuff and solidify the weirdest shit that's in my head, and then we make it happen. And so, like, if you guys are really interested in this, I think that'd be something really cool. So that's great to know. And I guess lastly, Make sure I get those links because people were asking about the plugins that you do for After Effects. So make sure we can get access to that. And I will say, like, there's one thing that Ryan and I have been working on, kind of in secret for quite some time now. I don't know, about a year, 2 years. I don't know. It's been a while.
Yeah, it's rounding out 2 years almost.
Yeah, well, we took like a year off from it though because we got so busy and family and all that kind of stuff. But we were developing a video game together, and it's been a lot of fun. And just talking about like the process of just making things and just I don't know, it's a lot of fun. We just had a lot of fun just like challenging ourselves and making things, and it's been a really enjoyable process. So I'm sharing an image from the game. It's just like one of the simple ones, but there's Meta right there in the middle. The name of it's Meta. That's but it's a lot of fun. This has been something that has been an ongoing thing that we've been just doing. We're probably going to come back into it once we both get the swing of this year. And it's just making a game is so complex. So
Yeah,
it's a whole nother level. So
yeah, the Unity, man, that's an amazing tool. That's another one. Again, it's not like X versus Y or whatever, but it's a great tool to explore. And if you're interested in interactive, Unity really makes creating interactive experiences approachable for artists. You know, it's not just like limited to the realm of hardcore programmers anymore. You can create some pretty fun stuff without really writing any code.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
It's amazing times, man. Amazing times. We live in amazing times. Awesome. There was something else I meant to ask. I think that's it though. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure you said or conveyed while we're here?
I just sent you the links to the After Effects script through
Awesome.
the Skype window.
Killer.
And yeah, this has been a lot of fun, man. Thanks for having me on. You know, it's been really cool, and always, man, it's always great working with you. And yeah, man, since I've met you, like it has been a crazy ride, man. since that first project at Sony, like looking back, it's like that really was a pivotal experience.
Yeah.
And so glad it happened.
Me too. Thanks to Ryan or to Kevin Jolson for connecting us and bringing us on. So that was really, it's been a crazy journey. And thanks for coming on again and sharing your time with us. I know you're very busy, so thanks for that. Everybody, send Ryan some love. If you want to see more of Ryan's work, I know that you're not super active online, which is totally good because it's so freaking time consuming. So yeah,
I'm not super active online, unfortunately. That's something I need to work on this year, I think.
Yeah, but I think at the same time, like you like your website's so freaking dated. It's like you got like you got like 5 projects on there. Yeah, but if you guys want to see some of Ryan's work, it's nanoanimal.com. I'll share that with you guys. It's a whole freaking job, man, like keeping up with this stuff. If I could, dude, the amount of time that it took for me to put together all that stuff for just Assassin's Creed, I'm like, dude, like this is a full-time other part job, you know? So, but at the same time, it's like what keeps going and stuff. And this is a part of exposing this stuff too. So, but yeah, so hit him up. There's this website. He's got some drawings and stuff. He's got 5 projects on there.
You can see me on the Twitter too. I don't do a lot of posting on Twitter, but I might not.
You have that one thing that you do on Twitter. What's that thing that it's like you have people send images to and then it runs a process through it? What's that thing called again?
Oh yeah, my little pick whip Twitter bot. I actually had to shut that down. It was kind of spazzing out.
Oh. Damn. But okay, on Twitter it's nano animal. I'll send you guys links to this stuff. So, and then you guys can follow him on Twitter and stuff. So, but yeah, so there you go, guys. So there's Ryan. There's the freaking genius behind a lot of this madness that you guys see. I'm stoked. I'm really happy you're here. And everybody else, all your awesome questions. You guys had some really incredible questions today. So thank you guys for that. That wraps it up. We're good to go. Thank you so much, Ryan. And thank you everybody for being here. And until next time.